Hey guys, it's me, Dr. Ree, and in this video we're going to be looking at the brachial plexus. In the last video we looked at the cervical plexus, which goes from C1, or is the collection of nerves that come from C1 to C4. In this video we'll talk about the brachial plexus, which is the collection of nerves that go from C5, the spinal nerve, C5, to the spinal nerve T1, which stands for thoracic. We can in this image, those start here. They're going to go underneath the clavicle, underneath pec minor, which we see right here, and go into the axillary region. So that's kind of the area that we see this brachial plexus. Now, on a cadaver, it's really hard to differentiate what nerve is which and so forth. But on this image, you can kind of see that there is some organization to this plexus itself, and we can even draw it out. So in here, we kind of see this is more of an organic or artistic version of our brachial plexus. You can see that I kind of color-coded these 5 different divisions of this brachial plexus. We're going to talk about that and draw ourselves right now. So let's get to it. You can find in your workbook, I can't remember if it's in the lab or the post-lab, but if you want to kind of 2 birds with 1 stone, you can draw this along with me in your lab workbook. Or I suggest doing this on a separate sheet of paper. You probably will draw this out numerous times to study for your lab quiz. That will be next week. So let's draw out our brachial plexus. So like I said, brachial plexus is going from C5 to T1. So the first part of drawing it out is just where do the nerves, what does it kind of look like? So I draw 3 Ys, 2 with the Ys opening up on the left, and 1 with the Y opening up on the right. Okay, that's the first part. The next part is to draw a Z, like that, and then a little X up here. There we go. We have that. Now, like you saw in my picture up here, right, I had the different colors. Those are going to be our different parts that make up our brachial plexus. So we name them our roots, our trunks, our divisions, our chords, and our branches. There's a few different mnemonics you could use to remember those. And so some of those are, I always remember this one. So read that dang cadaver book. Because I took anatomy, I learned about the brachial plexus in gross anatomy, which was, I was using a cadaver book, so that's why I thought of that. The other one that's common is to remember to drink cold beer. Now, if you are under 21, you should not be drinking. That's just my PSA. And with that, we have a way of remembering our 5 parts that make up the brachial plexus. Now let's label these parts. Well, good for us, the roots are already labeled. So C5, C6, C7, C8, T1. Next, we have our trunks. So from C5 and C6 becomes the superior, or sometimes called our upper trunk. So depending on the textbook, you'll see superior trunk. Some textbooks will say upper trunk. So I just put both of them so you make sure you know it no matter what you're reading. C7 becomes our middle trunk. It is always just called the middle. And C8 and T1 come together to create our inferior or our lower trunk. You could use either of them. So if you use either of these, you're correct. I just put both of them there. Now our divisions, don't worry, you don't have to label the image with your divisions, but there are 6 divisions here, so that's important to remember. So we had 5 roots, right? See, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 3 trunks. 1, 2, 3. We have 6 divisions. And then we come back to 3 for our chords. So our superior trunk is going to become what's known as our lateral chord. In lab, I will show you how I use my hands to kind of remember that how the superior becomes the lateral. Our middle is going to become our posterior chord, and our inferior trunk is going to become our medial chord. And then last, we have our branches. Now our branches also have 5, so you can kind of see it. It goes 5, 3, 6, 3, 5. I forget what that's called, but that's called something where it's the same in forward and back. You guys tell me, I'm not a math person. Any hoozles. So, but if you look here, you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, Dr. Ree, there's only 4 here. Where's our 5th branch? Well, we didn't draw it. So our last little thing to draw is our 5th branch, which is where my lateral chord and medial chord come together and they create our last branch. And there we have our 5 branches. So let's name our 5 branches. The first one is our musculocutaneous nerve. The musculocutaneous nerve is going to supply the muscles that are in the anterior brachium. Whoa, anterior brachium, you're thinking Pokeball of anatomy, right? Throw it on back to 2 labs ago, I think. And you should know that the anterior brachium is going to be what does flexion, and we had 3 muscles in the anterior brachium compartment. They were biceps brachii, coracobrachialis, and brachialis. Those are the 3 muscles supplied by musculocutaneous. Does that sound like a great quiz question? Absolutely it does, right? So this is where this lab is really going to apply a lot of things that we learned in previous labs. So that's the musculocutaneous nerve. The next nerve is the axillary nerve. The axillary nerve is going to supply the deltoid, and axillary, think near the shoulder, the armpit, right? And the deltoid is kind of right on top of the shoulder. So that's one way you can kind of remember there. The posterior cord is also going to give way to another nerve right down here of the radial nerve. The radial nerve is going to supply the posterior arm, so that's both the posterior brachium and the posterior antebrachium, and that is going to be muscles like our triceps, and in the antebrachium, think of things like extensor digitorum, supinator, things like that, radial nerve. The medial cord is going to create the ulnar nerve. The ulnar nerve is going to supply the medial aspect of my antebrachium in my hand, the muscles, the kind of lateral aspect. Basically, the muscles that have ulnaris in it, ulna, right, go with the ulnar nerve. And then our lateral cord and medial cord came together to create the median nerve. Now, I capitalized the N here to remind you, it's median, with an N. The nerve is an N. The cord is an L, medial. Medial cord, median nerve. It is not medial nerve. It is not median cord. Spelling usually doesn't count, but in this case, it will count, so make sure you know. L comes before N, just like medial comes before median. Okay? L comes before N, just like medial cord comes before median nerve. And there we have it. That's your brachial plexus. So on your quiz, this is what you will need. But there are some little nerves that do come off of different areas here. So I have them kind of pictured here, and so I'll name a few of them. You don't need to know this extensively or be able to draw it out, but it can be helpful when we talk about the nerves, you know where they're coming from. So starting with this really long nerve that we see here, it's coming off of C5, C6, and C7. This is our long thoracic nerve. The long thoracic nerve is going to supply the serratus anterior muscles. Also coming off of my C5 root right here, we have our dorsal scapular nerve. Dorsal scapular nerve is going to supply the rhomboids. Remember when we talked about the rhomboids is my rowing muscle. Okay, so think of rhomboids. Think of when you bring your shoulder blades together. The rhomboids are going to be right between that medial border of my scapula and my spine. And so when it contracts, those two things come together, which causes retraction. R for rowing and R for rhomboids, retraction. That's what's coming off of our roots. Coming off of our trunk, we only have things coming off of a superior trunk. Up here, we have our suprascapular nerve. The suprascapular nerve is going to supply two of our rotator cuff muscles, the infraspinatus and supraspinatus. And then underneath that, we have our nerve to subclavius. The nerve to subclavius supplies the subclavius muscle, which the subclavius muscle is going to be found right near our clavicle. Divisions, nothing coming out of there. Then we have our cords. Now there's kind of a lot going on. You can see that the lateral cord and the medial cord kind of come together, kind of like the Beatles, and it kind of has these two extensions. The two extensions where they kind of come together and kind of go wrap around, they are going to be for our pectoral nerves. So this is our lateral, there it goes, lateral pectoral nerve. That supplies our pectoralis major and minor, and our medial pectoral nerve. So that's what we're seeing right there, and that's just kind of they come together. That's called ansa pectoralis, just like we talked about ansa cervicalis in the cervical plexus. This where they kind of come together like this is an ansa pectoralis. Now, coming from the posterior cord, we have three nerves. So coming out of the posterior cord, we have three nerves. The one that is closest to the trunks, so closest to my trunks or closest to my divisions, is my upper. I already did my pectoral. Is my upper suprascapular. So our upper subscapular. And then on the other side right here, this is my lower subscapular nerve. They are going to be responsible for supplying the other rotator cuff muscle that we talked about, subscapularis, as well as a few others. I'll show you kind of muscles in a second. And then this one right here that's a little longer in between the two, that is my thoracodorsal nerve. And the thoracodorsal nerve is going to supply latissimus dorsi. So thoracodorsal, latissimus dorsi. Sounds like a great question. And then we come on in. Now there are a few nerves that I didn't draw here. There's some cutaneous nerves that come out here. Don't worry about it. But that's where they come out. They come out of the medial cord. All right. So I have this kind of little graphic, and you can pause and take a screenshot if you want, or I'm going to post this kind of image also on Blackboard just so you can kind of see it. But you see here that I have kind of this way of remembering what roots go with what nerves. So each of these nerves don't have information from every root, right? That's why it goes on this long venturing trek. So I have a little story on how I remember it, and I'll show you in lab kind of how I remember it. But let me tell you my little story. So I want you to take your hand and hold it up in front of you right now. Your thumb represents C5. Your index finger is C6. Your middle finger is C7. Your ring finger is C8. And your pinky is T1. So my little story to remember which nerve roots go with which branch nerve, right? These are those 5 branches, is 3 You can say 3 men, monkeys, anything you want to say. So we'll just say Marmu is what I normally say because that has Marmu is our 5 branches. So 3 Marmu. So if you were to make a 3 with your, because it said 3 Marmu. So it has 3 branches. Now in ASL, when you do 3, you don't do it like you're making a W because that's a W in ASL. You would do your thumb, your index, and your middle finger. So 3 Marmu is C5, C6, C7. 3 Marmu assassinated. So you make like a little finger gun with your hand. So there's 2 nerve roots that go with the axillary, and that is C5 and C6, right? So I make like my little, so 3 Marmu assassinated 5 rad men. So rad is the radial nerve and men is the median nerve. They are both 5, so all 5 fingers, so all 5 roots, C5 through T1. And 2 Ulta workers. Now, the Ulta workers is my far stretch. It's probably the hardest one to remember, but here's how I remember Ulta workers. So now you're going to have your hand in front of you. Now, an Ulta worker, well, she is a proper lady, so she drinks her tea with her pinky up. So you put up your pinky finger. Pinky, SpongeBob, pinky, right? Pinky up, Ulta worker. And then our ring finger, because she really wants her boyfriend to put a ring on it. So that is what the Ulta worker does. So that means the ulnar nerve is T1 and C8. That's the ulnar nerve. So if you put your hand up, 3 Marmu assassinated, 5 rad men, and 2 Ulta workers. So musculocutaneous is C5 through C7. Axillary is C5 and C6. Radial is C5 through T1. Median is C5 through T1. And ulnar is C8 through T1. C8 and T1. Now, in this picture, you can also see that I wrote out the muscles of the upper extremity that go with each nerve. And then these are, so like radial nerve breaks down into deep branch of the radial nerve and posterior interosseous, and the median nerve breaks down into anterior interosseous and recurrent branch of the median nerve. So I was just kind of showing that here as well. And here are some of those extra nerves that I wrote out on the other thing as well. And then there's a little drawing here with all of it. So again, I'll put that up for you. This is from an old thing. Don't worry. I don't have a Let's Draw the Brachial Plexus portion of your workbook. This was from a thing I did back in grad school. So in your book, you do also have a kind of labeling the brachial plexus like this. So, right, we would do the same thing that we have been doing, right? C5, C6, C7, C8, T1. Here's where they come together, right? And then we have our 3 chords, our 6 divisions, our 3 chords, trunks, chords, and then our 5 branches. So you can label, again, we'll do it one more time. Now you're probably like, why is she doing it so many times? Because the more times you see it, the better you guys will do. All right, so let's first label our roots, C5, C6, C7, C8, T1. Let's see how fast we can do it. We call these our roots. We call these our trunks. We have 3 of them. So we have an upper, a middle, and a lower, or a superior and an inferior. These are our divisions. There are 6 of them. These are our chords. We have our lateral. We have our posterior, and we have our medial. And then our last thing is our branches. We have our musculocutaneous. We have, now here's where it's a little tricky. You have to pay attention here. So, right, my lateral cord and my medial cord come together. That would be my median nerve. Down here, we see medial kind of continues. This would be our ulnar nerve. And then here, we see our 2 that are coming off of here. This is my axillary nerve, and this one is my radial nerve. And there we have it. That's our brachial plexus. All right, I'll see you in class and we'll go through this more. If you have any questions, please let me know, and